Welcome to the Generic Tech Support YouTube channel. By watching this channel, you are accepting that the content on this channel is intended for educational purposes only. We strive to provide valuable information to help you enhance your technical understanding. We do not condone the use of pirated software. Please respect local copyright laws and support software developers by using legitimate purchased products. All testing conducted on this channel is done in compliance with the Consumer Review Fairness Act and the United States Fair Use Act under Copyright Law, Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act. We aim to provide honest reviews, security configuration tricks, tips, and how-tos. While we make every effort to deliver 100% tested solutions, we acknowledge that we don't know everything. If you have additional insights or corrections, please share them in the comments. Like and subscribe to keep up with the latest OS reviews and security tips. Your support helps us continue to provide valuable content. Thank you for being part of our community.
Hey guys. So in today's video, I figured we would review Windows 11 and some basic security configurations that you can take into consideration to run your Windows operating system to protect yourself against ransomware. Now, I know we've gone extensively through security configurations and we've really looked at security as a whole when you're on a domain, but what if you're in just workgroup mode? What if you want to make your system more secure in workgroup mode, but you don't have any money? Maybe you don't want to spend anything on any additional products. Maybe you don't want to spend the time to build out vast or intricate configurations from a security standpoint, but you still want to secure your desktop and make it more or rather less likely to be infected by viruses, malware, ransomware, or really any of the other gauntlets of problems that can infect a Windows operating system. So as a very basic high-level configuration, we're just going to go through this real quick. So right now I'm logged on as an administrator account. Now, since I'm in an admin account, I have access to do anything on this local machine. I could create files, close files, install applications, uninstall applications, and at no point will I be blocked by doing that. I may get UAC pop-ups still to ask me if I'm sure I want to run something, but otherwise I basically can do whatever I'd like. Now, in some cases, you may have UAC disabled. This video won't be for you. If you have UAC disabled, this will not work for you, and unfortunately, without UAC re-enabled, this really isn't an option for you to follow. Okay, so since we need to have UAC enabled, let's make sure it's turned on first. Again, this is pretty much an out-of-the-box system. It's been running for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks at this point, but there's really nothing installed on it with the exception of Google Chrome. And I think the Passmark benchmark tool is still running on this system in the background. May or may not still be there, but at any rate, this system really doesn't have anything on it. So let's jump in to adjust our UAC. So this should work on both Windows 11 Pro Home as well as Windows 10 Home and Pro. You'll just want to click on Start. You're going to want to do a search for Control Panel. You'll just click on Control Panel. First thing you're going to go is User Accounts, and then you're going to click on User Accounts again, and then you're going to see Change User Account Control Settings, and you're going to set this to right here to notify me when default apps try to make changes to my computer. And you'll see Don't Notify Me when I make changes to the Windows settings. So this is the out-of-the-box configuration. So you just want to click on OK and then click on Yes to make that change, to set that change. If it wasn't already set that way, you're going to have to reboot the system to get to the point where you have UAC re-enabled. Okay, so let's talk about the various types of ransomware attack. Now, one of the most common one is going to be infection by clicking on something that you shouldn't have clicked on, or running an executable you shouldn't have run, or installing an MSI file that wasn't signed. Now, if you have Smart Screen turned on with UAC controls enabled on Windows 11, 90% of the time Windows 11 itself will block the running of these unsigned applications, or will at least require you to click past them to actually run these applications. The reason why is because the certificate of the application isn't signed by Microsoft or a trusted certificate store. So As a result, when you go to run these applications, you'll get the error message indicating that you can't run it because it's being blocked by Smart Screen, or it's being blocked in general by the Microsoft Defender application. So again, this is really designed for people that have an out-of-the-box configuration, that haven't really screwed with Windows too much. The other possible situation is somebody gains remote access into your system. Now, if they gain remote access into your system and you're logged on as an administrator, chances are what they'll do first is they'll install keylogger software on your system, which will pick up the keys that you're typing into your system, and they will know what your password is. Now, if you use the same password for everything, then they not only have access into your computer, but they'll have access into your bank account and everything else that you have saved as favorites or saved through your browser on your local system. So the first thing you'll want to do to secure yourself with that is to use like a product like Bitwarden's a good one. Again, not sponsored, but they do a really good job. Don't use LastPass. LastPass was breached, I think, more times than I can count within the past 4 or 5 years. Somebody actually stole their source code. So LastPass at this point is probably one of the most unsecured password storages you could use. You'd be better off saving the passwords in an Excel document and password protecting the Excel document than using LastPass. Don't save your passwords in your browser. Now, the reason why that is because if we go into like Google Chrome, for instance, right? And we say, okay, let's go into our passwords and autofill thing, right? So we want to grab our passwords. So we go into Password Manager, and we want to say, access these passwords once the passwords are saved in your browser. All they'll need to know is what your local logon is, what your password is into Windows. And if they have the keylogger software, they already have that, which means they could download every password that exists inside of your browser. Whereas if you have a third-party application like Bitwarden, they can't do that because they would need to know the Bitwarden password to log in. And if you have multi-factor authentication turned on, they wouldn't be able to access that to download the passwords without you approving it through the multi-factor authentication app. So that's why storing passwords in your browser is a really stupid idea. So don't do that unless it's something that you just don't care, right? So I mean, like if you store passwords, for instance, for, I don't know, an email account that only gets spam emails, then what the heck do you care, right? Somebody gains access to it. They're going to be able to see that you're getting, coupons to buy this or do that. They're not going to care about that. You're not going to care about that. It doesn't matter. But it's a convenience if you need to go into it. I get that. Otherwise, use a password storage app. Don't use the built-in password storage into any of the browsers. It's just not a good idea. Okay, so let's go now into the configuration of the Windows desktop to actually secure it. So I'm going to do this 2 different ways. I'm going to do this for the people that use Windows 10 or 11 for that matter, Home, and then Windows 10 or 11 Pro. So let's start with the Pro configuration. And what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on Start, and we're going to go to Computer Management. We're going to go to Local Users and Groups, and then Users, and we're going to create a new user and call it Desktop User. Or maybe Desktop Account. And then we're going to set a password. Now this password is going to not be the same password we would use for your administrator account. Make it a completely different password because once again, if they get a keylogger on your system and your password difference is 1 character, it'll take them less than an hour to crack the password and get into the other account. So don't use the same password. Use a completely different password than what you use for your local administrator account to log in as admin. So once you have your password access set, then you're going to make the choice as to whether or not you don't want the password to expire or not. I always suggest not doing that, allowing the password to expire, that you have to change the password after a certain time frame, but that's up to you. And then we're going to choose Create. And then we're going to choose Close. So now we have an account created here called Desktop Account. All right. That's going to be a logon account that's only for the users group. So what we're going to do is we're going to now create an account through the configuration for the Windows 10 or 11 Home people. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to click on Start, and then once you click on Start, you're going to want to actually go to your settings. Once you click on Settings, you're going to get the option to go to Accounts. So click on Accounts. Once you get into Accounts, you're going to choose Other Users, and then in here, we're going to actually add an account. And we're going to add the username for this. I'm just going to call it like Desktop Home. And then we'll add a completely different than our administrator password into the passwords field. Okay, so once you have the password entered, you're going to get the box is going to populate the information for your questions. These are mandatory. I'm going to say that these actually lower the security of your Windows system and make it less secure than if they didn't exist. But they are for ease of access. So if you forget a password, you can put the information in and, presumably unlock the account if you know all three answers. The thing is when it comes to the answers, you can't use the same answer twice, because if you do and somebody gets into the system and wants to gain access into the administrator account, and all they have to do is type in A on all three of these things to unlock the admin account and change the password, then realistically your password is only as good as that first letter that's in these password reset categories. So when you put something in here, you just want to put random things in here if you're going to actually not use this stuff. So that way, in the event that somebody does get into the system and wants to reset these passwords, they would need that specific character configuration to do so. So we'll just click on Next. Now, once the account is created, we have Desktop Home here, you can click the drop down and we can do Change Account Type. And we're going to see it listed as a choice between Administrator and Standard User. You want to leave it as Standard User. Once that takes place, what we're going to do is we're going to log out and log in as one of these accounts that we created onto the Windows system. Okay, obviously when you create the new account, the first thing you're going to be greeted with is to choose your privacy. Now, I leave this up to you as to what you want to add to this. Personally, I turn all this stuff off. If you want to leave it on, you can leave it on. I'm going to click on Accept. And we're going to get to the Start menu and log into the desktop. And you will see here that we are logged in as desktop account. So now let's talk about the security of running a user account versus administrator. Okay, so what did we do? We created an account, right? Now, that account is a user account. It's not an admin. And why is that important? And the reason why is because of this. This is our profile directory, right? So this data is linked specifically to our profile. And we could see that if we right-click on any of these things and go to Properties and we go to Location, we'll see the users directory, desktop account, which is the account we're logged into, so whatever your username account would be there, and then pictures. Now, the reason why this matters is because in the event that you get infected, it will only infect the profile that you're on, presumably, especially under a user account, because a user account won't have administrative rights to run the applications in order to install anything to infect the system. And how this differs, for those that don't know, is that if we go to the local drive, we go to Users, and we see this is our admin account. If we want to access this admin account, we're going to say we don't currently have permission to access this folder. And we're going to say to continue. And you'll see that we're going to get a pop-up message here that's going to give us our account that we would need and a location to enter a password to gain access to that location. And the reason why is because we're not an admin. Now, if we're logged in as an admin and we want to open up the Tor account or access the desktop account, as soon as we click on that continue, it will add the permissions into the security controls to allow us to have access to that location. So the reason why this matters is because in a situation where you're using Outlook, say, for instance, and you click on an email link that's infected with something, that infection can spread all over the machine. And if you're on a domain, all over the domain. But obviously in a domain configuration, there would be different configuration that would be applied. But in a regular home computer configuration, you don't really want to necessarily be running anything as the admin. You want to run things as admin through the UAC control, but not directly on the desktop as admin. Now, the reason why that also matters is because most keylogging software that exists, that's controls written by people with their own logic, generally isn't going to record the keystrokes for the UAC prompt because it creates a separate secure desktop when it prompts you for the UAC credentials. So therefore, it usually won't. And I say usually because there are some caveats or limitations to that, but usually it won't record the keystrokes, which means that you could put the password in, they still can't access your administrative password. So as long as this password to log into your user account is not the same as your admin password, you're in good shape. And I know what you're thinking. What about if they gain access to the machine? Well, that's the thing, is they won't really have a way to do that because they can't execute anything to install anything without admin creds. And if they do figure out how to run it as a service structure or something in the back end, then generally speaking, Windows itself, especially Home, won't allow remote access software into the system. Now, if you're on Pro and they turn on 3389, they try to remote desktop, we would get a pop-up message on the screen indicating that somebody's trying to remote desktop into the system. And that's a UAC pop-up. And then it'll ask you whether or not you want to allow them to access it. And obviously, at that point, if you don't know who's accessing this in the system and you see a pop-up saying that somebody's trying to access the system, you could just click on no and change the password for the admin account. Obviously, pull the network cable first before you change the password, because if there is, again, keylog software on there, it wouldn't be able to transmit in real time. And if they did have access to the system using that password and you change the password, they won't get the updated password. It's a cart and a horse situation. So let's take a look at this now, right? So we don't have access to the Tor account. We can't access it. But we can still function. We could still run Chrome. We could still run Edge. We could still get to the internet. We could still do anything that we could do before. Anything that was pre-installed on the operating system will still work. And the things that aren't pre-installed, if we needed to do something, like for instance, we go to our download location, downloaded Super Anti-Spyware, but I'm logged in as a user account. Do you think I'll be able to install this application? So that's something also to keep in mind, is the elephant in the room, which is the downloads location. That's linked directly to your profile. Now, it's catch-22 because in the event that you want to download a piece of software and you want everybody to have access to it, then usually you want to save as and save it somewhere else, maybe in the root of C drive. But if you're downloading stuff and you're not really sure what you're downloading, whether or not it's infected with something, generally speaking, you want to leave this in the default location and associate it to the downloads location. Now, the other caveat to this is that since this is a user account, it doesn't have admin access, and there would be presumably multiple accounts, if you did install an antivirus software on it and you ran the antivirus as another user account or as a user account, you're segregated to only pull the data information from this profile. So if you're on the admin account and you run this application to run a scan on the system, it's not going to scan the user account directory unless you take control or give yourself access through the user's directory. But if you do that and the machine is infected, you will infect the other profile. So don't do that. If you run into that situation, run the antivirus as whatever profile you suspect is infected with something. So with that said, what happens, or what do you guys think will happen, if I go to run this executable to install this software as a user on this desktop? All right, so for those of you guys that guess that I won't be able to do it, you're kind of right. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to right-click on this thing, and we're going to do Run as Administrator. And what that's going to do is that's going to produce a UAC control in a secure desktop location, where I'm going to have to enter the password for the Tor account. Okay, so I have the password entered. So now we're going to just click on Yes. And there you go. As you can see, I can still install stuff. I just have to go into the UAC, enter the password, and hit Yes. It's basically like Linux when you go into a command logic and you do a sudo command to install something. Whether it's a sudo snap or sudo apt-get, it's basically the same thing. It's obviously not as good as the Linux version because of the command line functions that just are way better in the Linux version than they are in Windows. But it will give you the ability to still do installs, still run applications that you need to as the administrator on the desktop that you're currently on without having to log on and log back into the system or change profiles and switch between things. So it still gives the ability to do administrative tasks. The only difference is that the desktop itself is going to basically exist as a user desktop. So once it's installed, I could still double click on it. It will still open up it will still allow me to run an antivirus on the system. It will still give me the results of any infections that I have. It'll still give me, all the information, so I can still do a scan, like let's do a quick scan on the system. It'll still allow me to do all this stuff from the user account, with the exception really only being that in order to run things to do an install or run things to do an upgrade or any kind of configuration, you would just have to go through the UAC prompt and enter in your admin creds to actually run the application, thus securing your desktop. Okay guys, so it finished and it detected 3 items, and the 3 items are just adware. I mean, it's not really a big deal, so we'll just click continue, and it'll say, we want to clear this out, blah, 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 and we'll say yes, and then we'll just hit continue, and it's done. So that just proves that you could still function. Everything that you could do in an admin account, you could use in a Windows user account, as long as you have UAC turned on and you don't mind entering your password every time you have to run something with an administrative task. And what that does is that protects you from infecting yourself, because these applications that have ransomware built into them, or have some kind of just bizarre configuration that you don't want running on your machine, they can't run without your permission. And if they can't run without your permission, ultimately it will require you to authenticate that application to run. Now, obviously, if you don't know what you're doing and you authenticate ransomware to install on your machine, you'll still infect yourself. But this at least gives you a built-in level of protection that you may not know already exists in Windows. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this short tip, this quick guide on how to secure your Windows desktop. All things considered, this should make life a lot easier and more secure for you, running as a user versus an admin, and still give you the functionality of the administrative purpose or the administrative account to still run the applications you need. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. All right, guys, take it easy.